Picture the summer of 2023. The Hamptons, all white everything. A crowd that reads like a who's who of American fame, artists, athletes, executives gathered at the kind of party that doesn't get publicized because it doesn't need to be. Everyone already knows. Everyone already wants in. Sean Combs stood at the center of it the way he had stood at the center of American music for 30 years. Untouchable, sovereign, a man who had built something so large, so deeply woven into the fabric of black culture and popular music that it seemed permanent. That was the last summer the empire felt whole. Within 14 months, he would be arrested in the lobby of a Manhattan hotel. Within 2 years, he would be sitting in a federal courtroom while survivors described what it cost them to be close to him. And within 25 months of that last untouchable summer, a judge would sentence him to 4 years and 2 months in federal prison. This is the story of how that happened, and why the number 4 years, when you hear what was said in that courtroom, still doesn't feel like a settled answer. To understand the fall, you have to understand the weight of what existed before it. Bad Boy Records was founded in 1993. Sean Combs was 23 years old. He had been fired from Uptown Records unceremoniously, humiliatingly, and he turned that rejection into motivation of a kind that is almost cinematic in retrospect. He signed the notorious B.I.G. The first Bad Boy release came out in 1994. Within 2 years, the label was one of the most commercially dominant forces in American music. He didn't just sign artists, he shaped them. Mary J. Blige, Usher, Lil' Kim careers that defined the sound and aesthetic of an entire era passed through his orbit. He produced records that went platinum in weeks. He appeared in his own music videos, his own commercials, his own interviews, always projecting the same message. That ambition paired with image could take you anywhere, and he was the proof. There is something important to name here, and it matters for everything that comes later. The image Sean Combs built was not just personal wealth. It was a specific version of black excellence that carried real cultural weight. He appeared on magazine covers, launched fashion lines, donated to schools. He represented, for a significant part of his audience, what it looked like when someone who looked like him made it in a country that had historically made that difficult. That image was both real and constructed. The parties, the legendary all-white events that became social institution, were spectacles of success made visible. For 3 decades, that image held. The question, the trial, eventually forced the public to reckon with is what else was happening behind it. November 2023. 2 things happened at nearly the same time, and the collision of them is what broke the story open. The federal government quietly opened an investigation into Sean Combs, and Cassie Ventura, the singer who had been in a relationship with Combs for over a decade, filed a civil lawsuit. The lawsuit alleged rape. It alleged coercion. It alleged years of physical abuse. It was specific, detailed, and it named him directly. It was settled within 24 hours. That speed, less than a day, became its own kind of evidence to observers. Not legal evidence, but the kind of signal that made people who had worked in entertainment, who knew how settlements worked, quietly take note. You settle that fast when you want something buried that badly. Then came May 2024. CNN released surveillance footage from a hotel hallway in 2016. The footage showed Sean Combs kicking Cassie Ventura, punching her, grabbing her by the neck and dragging her across the floor. She stumbles, tries to retreat. He follows her. It lasted seconds. It felt like a decade of context collapsed into one image. Nothing in his public record, no legal finding, no prior report, had prepared the public for the directness of what the footage showed. This was not allegation. This was not a he said, she said. This was a hallway camera that did not know it was being watched. Combs responded publicly. He released a statement apologizing, calling his behavior in the video inexcusable. He said he had gone to rehab. He said he was a work in progress. What the apology did not do was deny. And the absence of denial, after years of the image holding, was its own kind of statement. September 2024, Manhattan. Federal agents arrested Sean Combs at a hotel. The optics were stark. A man who had moved through New York like he owned it, apprehended in a hotel lobby on federal charges. He was charged with racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, and violations of the Mann Act, a 1910 statute that criminalizes transporting individuals across state lines for the purposes of prostitution. He pleaded not guilty. The bail hearing did not go his way. Judge Robin Tarnofsky denied release, citing the risk of witness intimidation. The defense appealed. The appeal was denied by Judge Andrew Carter, who at one point in the hearing, responding to a defense argument that the 2016 hotel footage reflected a loving relationship, simply asked, "What's love got to do with that?" From September 2024 forward, Sean Combs sat in a Brooklyn federal detention facility and waited for trial. The empire was now entirely in the hands of lawyers. May 2025, the trial began. The prosecution's central witness was Cassie Ventura herself. She was 19 years old when she first met Sean Combs. He was 36. She testified about what followed over the next decade, not as a series of isolated incidents, but as a sustained architecture of control, threats, violence, drug use that she described as coerced, and what prosecutors referred to throughout the trial as freak-offs, organized sexual encounters with male escorts, which she testified she was pressured to participate in a state of constant fear and hypervigilance. Her testimony lasted days. She spoke with measured precision. The defense cross-examined her aggressively. She did not break. A second survivor, identified in court only as Mia, also testified. She had worked as Combs' personal assistant from 2009 to 2017. She described physical and sexual assault occurring across those years. She spent 3 days on the witness stand. She looked down often. She spoke softly. She cried. During cross-examination, the defense accused her of fabricating her account as part of, in their words, a Me Too money grab against Sean Combs. After the trial, she wrote to the judge, "What he stole from me cannot be returned. It cannot be reduced to years or money." The hotel surveillance footage from 2016 was shown to the jury. The prosecutors also presented photographs, documented bruising, physical injuries consistent with Cassie Ventura's account of what had happened to her body over the course of their relationship. The defense, for their part, did not dispute that their client had committed domestic violence and physical assault. Their argument was more specific, that those acts, however real, did not constitute trafficking or racketeering under federal law. Then came the most striking moment of the entire defense strategy. After weeks of prosecution witnesses and evidence, the defense rested its case in under 30 minutes. They called 0 witnesses. Sean Combs did not testify. Their primary legal argument was this: the Mann Act, the 1910 statute at the center of the federal charges, had racist and sexist origins. It was designed in an era of deep racial and gender bias, and it had historically been applied against black men in particular. The defense argued that applying it here was itself an act of legal overreach. It was a structural argument, not a factual one, and it signals something important about what the defense team believed their best case was. Not that their client was innocent of everything, but that the law being used against him was illegitimate. 12 hours of jury deliberation followed. July 2, 2025. The jury returned a split verdict. Sean Combs was acquitted on the two most serious charges: racketeering conspiracy and sex trafficking. He was convicted on 2 counts of transportation for the purposes of prostitution, both Mann Act violations. The maximum sentence on those 2 counts was 20 years combined. The legal reality of what that verdict meant is worth pausing on. The jury heard the same testimony, the same footage, the same account of what Cassie Ventura said was done to her, and they concluded on the most serious charges that the prosecution had not met its burden beyond a reasonable doubt, while simultaneously concluding on the transportation counts that it had. The public reaction split almost immediately into 3 distinct camps. The first, that the acquittal on the most serious charges was a failure of justice, that survivors had testified at enormous personal cost, and the legal system had rewarded that courage with a verdict that felt incomplete. That convicted on the lesser charges was a version of got away with it. The second, that the conviction itself was the injustice, that Combs had been subjected to a prosecution shaped by cultural pressure rather than law, that the years of social media attention and meme culture had poisoned the possibility of a fair jury, and that the outcome reflected a cultural moment rather than evidence. The third, quieter but persistent, that the meme culture running parallel to the trial, the jokes, the no Diddy phrases, the internet content treating serious survivor testimony as entertainment fodder, had already trivialized what was happening inside that courtroom in ways that could not be undone. All 3 reactions point to something real. The tension between them is the moral architecture of this case, and the sentencing hearing was where it landed. October 3, 2025. The gap between what each side wanted tells you something about how far apart their realities were. Prosecutors sought 11 years and 3 months. They argued the sentence should reflect, in their words, the substantial psychological, emotional, and physical damage he has inflicted. The defense sought 14 months, effectively time already served. They argued the conviction was limited in scope, that their client had shown remorse and rehabilitation, and that release was warranted. Judge Aaron Subramanian sentenced Sean Combs to 50 months, 4 years and 2 months, a $500,000 fine, 5 years of supervised release to follow. Combs addressed the judge before sentencing. He apologized for what he called his sick actions. He begged for mercy. He spoke about his children. It was the kind of courtroom statement that is difficult to assess from the outside, whether it reflects genuine reckoning, strategic allocution, or some layering of both that even the speaker cannot fully separate. Then Cassie Ventura's victim impact statement was read into the record. She had written it herself. I testified that from age 19, Sean Combs used violence, threats, substances, and control over my career to trap me in over a decade of abuse. She described the freak-offs as something she was forced into. She described the ongoing psychological damage, the nightmares, the flashbacks, the fear, even now, that he or his associates might come for her and her family. And she wrote this: the abuse was deliberate, the control was relentless, the damage is lasting. Judge Subramanian spoke directly to the survivors after pronouncing the sentence. To Ms. Ventura and the other brave survivors that came forward, he said, I want to say first, we heard you. He called them brave. He told them their families would be proud. After sentencing, the defense immediately announced plans to appeal, arguing that the judge had used the word coercion repeatedly in his reasoning, even though the jury had acquitted on the coercion-based charges. They called it unconstitutional. They argued a jury's verdict should mean more. Outside the courthouse, Gloria Allred, representing other alleged victims, said the judge had been thoughtful, that Combs had to pay the price, that her clients, who had feared he might walk free entirely, would find some relief in knowing he would remain in prison for years. 1 week later, on October 7, 2025, President Trump confirmed that Sean Combs had requested a presidential pardon. No pardon was granted. Sean Combs is the third major entertainment figure convicted on serious charges since 2020. R. Kelly was sentenced to 30 years. Harvey Weinstein was convicted in 2020, convicted again in a second state trial in 2023. Now Combs. What connects them is not just the crimes alleged, it's the machinery. Each of these men operated within an industry ecosystem, record labels, studios, management structures, legal teams that, for years, processed complaints and kept moving. Settlements were signed, accusers were discredited, careers continued. That machinery does not disappear when a verdict is read. It is still operating around other powerful men in other industries right now. What the trials of Kelly, Weinstein, and Combs revealed is not that the system caught them. It's that the system didn't catch them for decades, and that the mechanism of finally catching them was, in each case, survivors willing to testify under conditions that cost them enormously. And then there is the question of the internet. The Combs case ran parallel to one of the most sustained meme cycles in recent memory. Baby oil jokes, party survival humor, no Diddy, as a punchline that metastasized into every comment section on every platform. Roblox games built on the premise, a kind of collective ironic distance that let millions of people engage with the story while never quite sitting with what was actually being described. Cassie Ventura testified about a decade of her life. Mia sat on the stand for 3 days. Other survivors submitted impact statements describing damage that they said no sentence could fully account for. That testimony existed in the same cultural moment as the memes. Both were real, and the distance between them, the gap between what the courtroom contained and what the internet turned it into, is worth sitting with, because that gap has a cost, and it is not paid equally. Sean Combs entered custody in September 2024. With time served credited, he will serve roughly 3 more years before his release. 3 years. Cassie Ventura will carry what happened to her for the rest of her life. So will Mia. So will the others who testified, and the others who didn't, and the others whose names were never in the courtroom at all. The Bad Boy catalog still exists. The music still plays. A generation grew up with it as the soundtrack to something, summers, ambitions, the feeling that success was possible. That doesn't become untrue because of what the trial revealed, but it becomes complicated in a way that doesn't simplify back down. The empire is gone, the music remains. And the question of whether 50 months, for what was described in that courtroom, by those women in those words, was the right number. That's a question this country is still answering, even when it stops paying attention long enough to think so. Some things don't get settled just because a judge speaks. If this case made you think, tell me what you think in the comments. And if you want the next full breakdown, it's already up.